Hey everyone, Philo here. Patch 14.2 comes out today, and so there's a lot going on. It's a follow-up to 14.1, some of the changes that were supposed to be there, but they just didn't have time to put them in. So we're going to go over them quickly. There's a lot to cover, a lot of changes. The biggest one being stat shard changes. So normally you'd have to choose armor, MR, stuff like that. So instead, because they didn't want to have situations where you would accidentally take armor into a mage bot lane, or you take MR into the wrong matchup, they decided they're going to add HP. So let's look at this. The changes are going to be 6 armor. It's going to be instead 2% movement speed, and 8 magic resist is going to be bonus health based on level. This is in the second row. In the first row, it'll be adaptive force unchanged. Okay, then we get into the third row, defensive shard. Also, you get the option of bonus health, and you can get, instead of armor, you get tenacity and slow resist, and that will matter later on because unflinching will get changed in the future from what I've seen. Lastly, more magic resist into health. So it's going to be, it'll be determined what this means for tankiness in the early game, because you're not going to have a lot of the base stats and it's going to be more scaling. So we'll see. It might have higher thresholds. Maybe it's harder to kill you, maybe it's not, to be determined, but that'll be something that'll be interesting. I think it'll be pleasant because I honestly pick my shards kind of into the wrong matchups, and that can be frustrating as a player. And most importantly, I think the movement speed is going to be really big because you'll have a lot of champions that can take advantage of that. And MS is a stat they took away a long time ago, and because it was kind of inherently hard to balance. I mean, some champions just use it so well. Champs that don't want to kite, I think for top lane, like a lot of ranged champions are going to be able to kite you. Taking this as well as taking the celerity, get even more movement speed. We'll see how that affects the pools. And then Smolder will be coming out. He's not going to be coming out for about a week, but it'll be really interesting when he comes out. He's going to be a AD carry. He kind of has like an evolving Q with the more you get it done or more damage you do on people. So really interesting, and then we'll be able to see him in pro play very soon after that. Okay, on to the first champion changes. So we're going to have Ari getting a buff here. She's going to get her E charm reduced by 2 seconds. Not that big. I mean, Ari's biggest problem right now is she just doesn't do any damage. So, I mean, it helps because she is kind of a charm bot, so maybe have more opportunities to do that. But overall, I think a very whatever change for her. Not going to really change how she's played or, anything for pro play. The next thing we'll see here, Blitzcrank is getting his armor decreased and his E damage decreased by a little bit. I mean, small nerfs, but it is Blitzcrank. Even though losing 3 armor is, can be a big deal because you do take a lot of auto attacks as a melee support. Overall, I think it will be just the same. If you land hooks, Blitzcrank will be good. If you miss hooks, he's not going to be good. Okay, big changes for Briar. And honestly, I don't have a ton of experience with this champion. She seems like she just heals, so we'll go over this really quickly. So it seems like what they wanted to do here, let's see, healing application, 25% per 1% missing, into per 1% on missing health. Bleed tick rate is lowered. So I think the easy, honestly, let's just read the summary because I don't understand any of that. So passive healing application decreased, bleed tick rate decreased, Q damage increased, damage type changed to magic, now applies on hit effects and lifesteal. W heal on bite adjusted, critical strike modifier removed. Wow, a lot going on here. I don't play Briar, but to me, it just seems like that they want her to do damage, but they just don't want it to be as frustrating to deal with her when she just full heals from nothing, right? I think that looks like what they're trying to do with her, which is a good thing because personally, I think that's completely lame when the champion can just go from 10% HP to 80, and you kind of miss your kill window. So I do think it's a really interesting champion design, so I hope she'll be able to keep on getting played. But I think that's what they're going for, and hopefully she will be less frustrating for like a normal player to experience. Okay, stuff I'm more familiar with, Camille. Okay, so she's getting a little bit of a buff here, a little bit more base health, which could be even nicer with the extra shards, especially since she's also getting adaptive defensive passive reduced. A couple seconds scaling up into her regular levels. So early game, especially level 1, or sorry, especially in the 1 through 6, where she can actually get off a lot of autos, I think it will be nice to have that. And as well, like the Q movement speed getting up by 10%, you will be able to get a lot more like Q into second Q procs with your shield. So it could just be like a little bit help, because a big thing with Camille is being able to dictate and win the early part of the lane, so that when you're in the weaker area, post 7, because your ulti doesn't really do a lot except for setup for ganks, it'll be easier for her to actually like keep the lane equal so that she can get into her items, because once you get into Triforce or Sundered Sky, she's going to be actually a strong champion. But early part's always been really difficult for her. And then Darius buffs. I know the Bane top lane, no one wants to see this who plays top lane, but Darius is getting some buffs. I haven't seen this champion in a while, so it's probably deserved. These are pretty minor. I mean, he's just going to have his mana cost reduced a very little. And then he's going to have his healing based on missing health per target, a few percentage. So the heals will be a little bit bigger, and it will matter in like the 1v2s. Like when you're ganking him, it'll matter a lot, especially if you can get 2 Qs off on you during a fight. That will matter. You got to think about that when you look at these like missing health things. This is a pretty low spell as far as cooldown. So him being able to get off 2 in a fight, this number instead becoming 2% or at a maximum of a 6%, ends up becoming something like 4 or 6% into a maximum of 12 or 18, which actually adds up a lot. And then the biggest thing for him, I think, out of this is he's going to get more passive armor penetration on his E, which is really important for dealing with tanks, which he's supposed to be. Like Darius is supposed to be the tank buster champion. And this is also the ability you max second on Darius, so you will get the 40% really quickly. Just kind of like a nice little edge, because I do think that even when you're playing him against tanks, like tanks are just they're kind of hard to kill. So I think being able to get a little bit more armor penetration is going to help him a lot. Hopefully we see something like that for Mordekaiser, because I think he also is a similar champion style to Darius, so he's supposed to be good against tanks, but he doesn't have the amount of arm. He doesn't have very much magic penetration, especially with the new magic resist items. Okay, this is a big one because they changed Ezreal. They gave him some compensation buffs because he was so bad. He was so bad after last patch that they had to buff his W a little bit. I think they reduced the cooldown like 4 seconds or something like that. And so you would be able to use it consistently, especially when you started getting CDR. So they're adding even more buffs to Ezreal. And I personally think this will probably put him in a spot where you'll see him get played a lot in solo queue. He might even creep into getting played into competitive, just because he's, if you pair him with like a good enchanter like Karma, they can always push lane and get prio. He might even play well with some of the range supports like Ashe, champions like that, where if you're just spamming spells onto the wave and getting value, you're going to be in a really good spot with like the poke you can apply. So plus he's always like been pretty good against Varus at just being able to like survive, because you don't have to be so worried about getting hit by Varus ulti. So you might be able to see him in competitive. We'll see though. So basically you're just getting some extra damage onto Q, and you have more AD, and especially the W getting a buff of 40% bonus AD. And like I said before, it does go down. It did go down a cooldown, so this ability is up quite a lot. So a really big buff on that. And then True Shot Barrage also got 20% AD bonus, and it got a little bit of base stats like 25, 50 in the later part of the game. So True Shot Barrage probably gonna be hurting a ton, and especially if you get an S's Flux on you into a True Shot Barrage, it's going to be insane damage. So expect a lot of Ezreal and solo queue. I think people really like this champion and they want to try him out. Okay. I've been an abuser of Fizz for a minute. I've been saying this champ is bonkers. So he already got a little bit of a nerf before, but pretty deserved. I think what was happening is you have Storm Surge, you have Lich Bane. If he QWs you, he procs both, and you basically lose 60 to 70% of your life. And he can get out for free because he's Fizz and he just presses E. So really frustrating to deal with. So I think this is great nerf because, in solo queue, this champ is just terrorizing everything. They're just nerf. He already got a little bit, so this is like the secondary version of nerfs for him. Just a little bit more AP ratio taken off of his Q, and they're also taking off some of the dot damage of Seastone Trident for the scaling from 40% to 30%. So kind of just got double hit. I still think he'll be good because this chap when he's ahead, and it's easy to get ahead because he's an assassin, he can roam around. I still think he'll be good, but this will help make it so those QW into runaway trades don't just one-shot you, more or less. Okay, another champion. This champion's been struggling a lot. So Garen has been bad since the changes in 14.1, mostly because the items are not that great for him, and he really did like building Stridebreaker as his mythic. So he's been struggling so far, and the changes that they're making is they're making his damage reduction duration on his W being a flat 4 seconds, which is honestly quite a lot, because this ability you would never level at second, and so you're basically getting the same value as you did last patch from level 2 whenever you get it, or level 3 of the version of it that's you wouldn't get until you're level 15 effectively, or level 17 actually. So kind of big, since you do take a lot of you can go in 4 seconds, a long time, go in, do all your damage, proc phase rush. During that whole entire time, you take 30% less damage on top of the shield you get from W. Being able to get out, I can see this being pretty good. This is a nice change for him. They're also changing his damage per spin, and they're just giving him a little bit more AD early. This is just early. Later on, it will be the same. So it's just a little bit AD early. You probably won't feel it that much. It might be something where killing the creeps is a little bit better. But to be determined. We'll see. His wave clear might be a little bit better based off this, but I don't think it will put up like any kill angles. It probably won't make that much of a difference, especially since you max E first. By the time you are level 7, you're gonna have pretty much the same exact thing. Okay, so Gragas, I was honestly surprised to see Gragas on the buff list, because I thought that he was already at a great spot. He could be a tank. He could be kind of a one-shot mage because of the Storm Surge item. So I thought he was doing great. Was in a good spot, doing really well. And I actually thought that with the changes to the shards, where you would get health, was actually just going to make him stronger, because a champion like him, where his sustain is based off of his percent health, you're going to have even more sustain. So honestly, he's getting a little bit of armor growth, kind of small, but the health growth as well. So not like huge changes, but getting an extra 6 health per level, getting an extra like 0.2 armor. You get past the early stages where you're a little bit more mana gated, and you're gonna have an extra couple armor, extra 30 or 40 HP on top of the extra buffs extra HP from the shards. Kind of big. And I think the biggest thing is the early explosive cask. Losing 20 seconds off of your ultimate on a champ that's like pretty ulti reliant to really set up plays and set up kills, it's gonna be really big, because now you can kind of just throw this thing out there, and if you miss, it's gonna be up in quite a barely any time, so you can just look for more plays and have more opportunities to get kills to set up things. So expect Gragas. I think Gragas will start getting more pro play now. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, about what the pool might be. But he looks really good. I think he's probably one of the safest top laners you can pick right now. So, great champion if you want to start playing top. So they nerfed Gwen a little bit. This is kind of partial revert of the 14.1 micro patch they did. So they're just giving her a little bit more percent of targets like max HP when she does use her passive. So this is just going to help her when she's just a little bit more damage, and especially versus tanks. So not that big of a change. I mean, she's already great into tanky champions, and she has a lot of like insta-win matchups. So pretty much the same champion she was, the remainder of last patch. Great against tanks, harder against some bruisers. Kind of slow rolling, like it takes a while for this champ to get going, but if you're in a good matchup and you get a lot of farm, she will 1v5 a game. So So okay, we get into Hui, and he's just getting a little bit of cooldown because ability haste is kind of a tough stat to get right now. So now he's getting a little bit more ability haste on his E. It's getting down a few seconds, especially in the early ranks. It matters a lot. 3 seconds is a lot. And then the flee duration, which is kind of big because this is kind of like one of his only real peeling tools when somebody gets on him. And getting an extra 0.5 seconds onto your fear, I think it can be really nice. This champion is like really, really borderline being good. So I don't know what the point will be. And part of it was pro players needing to understand and get used to how to play with this champion. But he is getting closer and closer to being picked in pro play. And Riot seems like they're really interested in him being a part of that pool. So I don't know if this is the buff that's going to make it happen. I know Fnatic played it once before, but it's still kind of like a very on the edge champion. This might be enough to make it go over, but we'll see. Okay, and then I'll go into, so Alawi really desperately needed some buffs. And the reason for that is right now with the map and the lanes being so open, you cannot really effectively use your tentacles. You basically can't hit people when they're in the middle of the lane, which with champion like Alawi, I mean, her whole entire kit is based off of hitting people with tentacles. So she's having a big issue with that. These buffs, I don't think are going to like help her too much. It's kind of like, I think Riot recognizes that she's in a really bad spot, and they don't want to make these quick sweeping changes of like making her tentacles bigger or maybe even changing the champion. So this is just to kind of help the people who like Alawi want to keep playing her and keeping her from being like just completely unplayable right now. So she's getting a little bit more mana. And getting a little bit HP. I mean, the mana is just supposed to make it so that you can actually use your Q to farm, and you can get more opportunities throughout E, since you're not going to be able to play in the middle of the lane as easily. She's also getting a little bit more healing onto her passive, which is every time a tentacle slams, you get a little bit of missing health. So she's going to have the same problems that she's had, but at least you know that Riot has their attention set on her, and hopefully they'll make some changes that make her a little bit more what she's supposed to be. Okay, so Jax has been good for so long. He's just been like probably one of the most solid blindable top laners, can play in any matchup, always pretty useful. And so now they're finally gonna nerf him, and I think these nerfs are fine. I don't think this will matter too much. I think this only really affects some matchups where winning the first 3 levels was so important. So basically what they're doing is they're going to just take off damage off of E. They're taking off about 15 base damage per level, and they're going to be taking off 0.5% of target's maximum health, which, I mean, it's going to be like 15 HP or something. I don't know. So not that much. And all this stuff does get multiplied by how much the Counter-Strike has absorbed. So, and when it comes to like level 1 through 3 is when this spell is kind of its most broken, because it helps you get lane control and it helps you kind of auto win a lot of trades. This will be a big deal. I'll have to see it in game to feel it out, because Jax was kind of borderline just being able to win a lot of early matchups because his E damage was so high. And I think if it is a lot less, then he's gonna have a lot of problems with actually getting advantages, and because getting lane control is like his biggest thing. So I think these are a good place to start, because I think this champ is frustrating to deal with, and I think it's probably been too good for too long. So we'll keep an eye on it, but I do think good direction. I'm glad to see Jax nerfed. I think this champ kind of bottlenecked a lot of top lane as well. Okay, probably the biggest win this patch, in my opinion, probably gonna be Karma. I think these changes will probably make Karma one of the best solo queue champions, and it might even make it good and competitive. It remains to be seen. A lot of it depends on the jungle pool. You might see more players play like even harder carrier junglers, but I can honestly see people playing like a Xin Zhao plus Karma combo, because the way that basically the thing they did is they added 20% AP to our Q. And I think if you build Malignance and you build AP, your Monster Q is going to do a lot of damage. And I actually think, if I remember correctly, this is a change they had made when Karma was really good in mid lane before, is they ended up nerfing her AP values to by 20%. So now they're kind of reverting that. She's also getting 15% AP on her shield strength. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see a lot of mid Karma. I think it will be one of those things in solo queue where if your jungler's playing like Kindred or Graves or Master Yi and you just play Karma and you just buff them and win lane, because Karma's a great laner, you'll just win the game. Because having a champion like this where they add like a little bit of utility to your team, it's just gonna be really important. And I'm gonna try it out a lot. I think our Q is gonna slap people. Like, I think you're hiding in a bush, you hit people with RQ and Malignance, and then you run at them and you W them. I think that's gonna hurt like quite a lot. So I'm excited to see what she is now. And I'm gonna play her a lot, but I think these are really big buffs. I think she's probably gonna be played a ton. Okay, so Karthus coming in. These are really just Karthus actually surprisingly kind of in a bad spot from the patch changes, which I initially thought he was going to be good, but for a lot of reasons he's not that good. They're just adding a little bit of Q damage. This will increase his clear a little bit, and they're adding Wall of Pain, giving 10% more magic resist. I mean, Karthus is just going to be Karthus. He's going to either get a ton of kills from ulting low health targets, or he's going to be useless and die instantly, pretty much from anything, because he's such a squishy champ. Kind of whatever. Don't think it's going to really change the champion that much. Something I'm really familiar with, Rumble getting some more of adjustments overall, but pretty much a nerf. He's getting his Q damage lowered on his base, and he's also getting his harpoons to do less magic resistance later on. But early on, it is a little bit more. As you can see, they have 12, 14. Oh, sorry, I'm misreading this. So this is just a straight nerf. I don't know how much this will actually change the champion. He's losing about 10 damage on everything. And you were kind of overkilling people. I think this is borderline for being either he's still the same champion and all these don't really matter, and maybe his worst matchups are slightly worse. Champions that can build MR really easily. But he was already overkilling people by quite a bit. So I think he's still going to be a good champ. I think there's a chance this knocks him out of competitive completely, because he was already losing a lot of games, especially in LCS. He was losing every game. And I think that these nerfs, he's going to just get knocked out completely. I don't think anyone's going to play him top any longer. And then that will kind of, the cause of that will be that Udyr is going to be like the tier 1 top laner, like untouched. And I will not be surprised if you see every team banning Udyr. You might have some people who want to play like, maybe niche matchups into it. Maybe they'll play Gwen into it. Maybe some people will work on Darius and they'll play Darius into it. But I think with Rumble kind of out of the pool, Udyr is just going to be the best top laner, and you'll probably see it banned a lot. Shen getting 4 AD probably doesn't matter at all. I'm not even sure this really helps him with his like CSing. I guess that could be the only thing. Maybe he'll be a little bit better at getting, like, his level 1 is certainly better, so maybe he can get level 1 prow, which is important in a lot of matchups. But the problem with Shen is the matchups he wins, he just auto wins because of his kit. The matchup he loses, he just auto loses because of his kit and how limited it is. So I don't think that he's going to really see any difference. There might be more people playing Ignite Shen and cheesing kills at level 2 because, he's going to surprise people with his damage like he always has. But that's about it. So Teemo, thank God, getting some nerfs. I hate this champ. It's not fun to play against. But these are pretty tiny. I mean, he's still going to be annoying. Basically, on hit Toxic Shot is getting a little bit of an AP nerf, and his charge time on his Noxus traps, which this thing is a little messed up, but is basically just a little bit longer. you know, he does max this ability first, but you don't really build that much AP on Teemo. I mean, a lot of the times you're going Nashers into the I mean, you could go Malignance, but I can't remember the name of it. The true damage item. So, you know, I think this will be a very whatever thing. It's not really going to affect him that much. Still going to be the same champ. Okay, big changes for TF. I'm a big TF fan, so I'm really curious to see, like, you know, what he's getting changed on. So we're going to have his base attack speed. I guess they're just changing this around. But it says that it seems like it's the same. Wait towards one rather than... Okay, so this is just his basically his money generation. So okay, so this is giving him a little bit less econ is what I'm seeing. We're also doing wild cards is getting AD added to it. So that maybe, you know, ADTF might be on the menu. We're also getting more of a crit multiplier, it seems like. And reset on his auto attack timer. Oh yeah, this is actually really nice because one of the things about TF was when you picked the card and it wasn't in your auto attack queue, it was incredibly awkward to use. So I think that'll be really nice. You can kind of just instantly fling the card out. He's getting his E, getting pretty big changes, an extra 20% attack speed at max. And they added AD onto this. So it seems like they really, really want AD TF to be good. So I'll definitely try it out. I think especially like it can be good. You're playing ADTF. You can even run, you know, you can run Triforce. Of course, that's going to be good because you need a Sheen item. You could run the Cyclo Sword. You could run the Storm Surge maybe. Like there are a lot of good AD items. So I'd be really curious to see if like people actually do this. And yeah, I'm really excited. I'm gonna play this and see exactly, because especially wildcards being bonus AD is so strange to me. That's gonna feel so weird because most of the time it just does nothing. So it's like, do you even, you know, should you still max wildcards? Should you not max WSEC? It's gonna be like quite an interesting time to play TF and see what's actually good. Veigar getting 30 plus health, absolutely useless. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, Veigar is just such a slow champion. It might help him against, you know, some of the more aggressive assassins like Zed or Yasuo or Yone, who can get on him easily. But I think for the most part, Veigar is just going to be Veigar. He either just scales up and gets 1,000 AP, or he kind of does nothing. Okay, so getting into the items. The big thing with the items has been support. The support items have been broken, and they also have been abused because you'd be able to run support items on 2 people and pretty much just make it very, very viable and useful. So I know they were going to change it, so I would like to see what they ended up doing. Bloodsong looks like just getting straight up nerfed by 2% on the exposed weakness damage, which is basically PTA. Experimental Hexplate, I saw they were going to do this change. Basically, they just moved a little bit of the base stats. For instance, you get more attack speed while you don't ulti. And then when you do ulti, you get a little bit less attack speed. Probably a buff because the champions it's good on, like Nocturne and some other junglers, are farming. So getting the extra attack speed off of your ulti is probably better. And then they're also changing the recipe. Instead of being Noon Quiver, which was, you know, kind of an awkward item, they put it in Hearthbound Axe, which I think is a little bit better item for junglers and most champions. Frozen Heart getting a little bit more expensive, 100 gold. Doesn't really matter. I think that this item is still going to be one of the best second items or first items on a support because it's so cheap. You might see it on junglers because it's so cheap. It's just a really cost effective. Having one on your team is just really important because the AoE kind of debuff of attack speed it puts on everybody is really useful. Horizon Focus getting a little bit of a buff. Basically, the range requirement is a little bit lower, so it might be more beneficial for some champions. Hard to say what, you know, this difference will be. Maybe you'll see it on a few more. The focus AoV, the reveal for pretty much when you hit people, how much you can see around them is a little bit bigger. I mean, this item is so niche that I don't think this will matter. I mean, the problem with it is the people that it's good on, like the long range people, benefit so much from other items that it just kind of like, and it doesn't really help you when you're trying to get into your other items. Like, it doesn't really add on to anything like a death cap would. It doesn't give you pen. You know, I would say stuff like Shadow Flame and Storm Surge are a lot of just better versions that you're trying to burst people down. So it's kind of just an okay item, and I don't think it'll get really picked up anymore because of that. So for whatever reason, they decided PD was not going to have Zeal when they first announced it, and so they made it Hearthbound Axe. So they're basically retconning that. This is going to have a similar build to what it was before, which is going to be Zeal and Rectrix, which is, I believe, the longsword plus like a little bit of gold item. So just changing the build path, I think mostly because aesthetically it was just weird to have what has always been a Zeal item not have Zeal in it. And this is the item I was talking about for Teemo, but I could not remember the name of it. So Riftmaker, they're just making it a little bit more expensive because it is just a really, really good item in general. I think it'll still be the same. You know, you'll pick it on champions like Singed and Mordekaiser and Teemo and Gwen, and it'll still be their best item regardless of having another 100 gold. We're gonna Steel Sigil. I like this change a lot because honestly, this item felt awful to build for whatever reason. Just 1200 gold was such a weird item spot into this, so I'm glad they changed it. I think especially since, if I remember correctly, yeah, this builds out of Death Stance and it builds, I believe, out of GA too. So it was strange having a 1200 item slotted with like 1100 item and slotted with a 1300 item. So I think bringing it down so that it's like much more in line with a lot of secondary items and builds, such as, you know, the Warhammer, the Axe, Phage, it just makes more sense. 1200 was such a strange slot. Like, not a lot of items are 1200 cost. So this is a really, really big nerf. They've been nerfing this item ever since they released it because it was so good. They're bringing it down another 10 AP. They're also bringing down the Squall damage, which is the, you know, if you proc it and you do like % of their HP, it does even more. They're bringing that down another 10 and 7.5 AP, depending on your melee or ranged. So the question is this item even good anymore? And I think it's pretty borderline. The problem is Shadow Flame is so situational if you can get them low enough to get the crit value. It's kind of more of an execute item, where this item is just straight up, if you're an assassin, you're gonna get the proc. So I'm really on the fence about this. I think people will try it, but I wouldn't be surprised if this item is just a little bit too bad now. Losing like as much AP as it has and just losing a lot of the value. It might just be better to build into higher AP items to, you know, get into the Bloom item or getting to Death Cap, and just try to build off of that. Since a lot of the AP on other items are so high, I can imagine just getting other things might be better. So remains to be seen. I don't know. Have to test it out more. Stridebreaker getting a little bit of a buff. You know, 5% attack speed, a little bit extra cost. It'll be nice for like a Garen because he did get some buffs, but I think this item is very underwhelming now compared to its lot of contemporaries. You know, you don't really need what it does for a lot of champions. So I think that, you know, it'll be nicer for Garen and for Set example, as they showed, maybe for Darius, but you know, I think most of those champs are pretty happy building Triforce, to be honest. So very strange. Or I would be very surprised if this item actually gets picked up a lot. So this is the big solution that they're doing to the support items. We've seen double support items start to surface as a game warping strategy, so we're adjusting the gold income rules on all support items, which should effectively eliminate the viability of doubling on support items and the gold they give. So gold penalty now applies globally to anyone who has a support item in their inventory. Additionally, every champion with a support item now contributes towards hitting the minion penalty. So basically, what does this mean? So when you have the item, once you hit a certain threshold, you get penalized if you're farming. And so how people were getting around this is one person would have the item and then they would farm, and then the other person would have the item and then they would farm. And so they'd effectively both get the item but then, they wouldn't eat the penalty so much at the same time. Now they're just adding it on, like your whole entire team consists of the one penalty. So you're not going to be able to use multiple versions of it, which I think is great. I honestly thought they were going to just completely kill it, or they were going to go with the option of making it so you can only get one as a team. But then that opens up to getting griefed in, poor situations like that where people make mistakes, they buy the wrong item, or maybe someone's trying to just mess with someone's game. You don't really want that. I think that this is a great way to deal with it, and I hope that it just goes away, because I think this is always such a frustrating thing for most players to deal with. They don't want to play games where you have to play against double support items and you kind of feel like you're getting cheesed, and it's just not that fun. So bounty adjustments. So it looks like bounty gold 20 to 80% of player bounty is reduced depending on team gold deficient. 30 to 90% of player bounties is reduced depending on gold deficient. So what does this mean? We're looking to improve edge case. I think this basically just means that you're not going to get as many bounties if you're just farming. I think that is the case. So hopefully you won't get as many random bounties. Yes, okay, so yeah, it basically is just you won't get as many random bounties for just farming and doing like whatever you're doing on the map. It's kind of whatever. I mean, I think it's nice because right now the game is so easy to come back on, and part of that is getting bounties is really easy, and if you get a kill and you get a bounty, you get a lot of gold. So I think it's nice. They do need to reduce, they need to help the snowballing a little bit. It shouldn't be this hard to close out games where if somebody dies once or twice, you actually like throw your whole entire lead. Infernal Drake adjustments. This is the little shards or cinders on the ground. You get a little movement speed buff. It'll give you ability haste. It used to give you 0.3 per of them, and now it's giving 0.6. So I think they really want this to be like a fun mechanic whenever it's an Infernal Drake. And I was getting in the habit of picking them up, but now I'm really going to pick them up because getting 0.6 ability haste, I mean, during a game, you can get like 30 or 40 of these pretty easy. I mean, they're everywhere. So, imagine, especially with ability haste being so sparse, I can see this being a big deal where trying to get a ton of them and just focusing on them, kind of like the Bard passive, can actually add up to lots. So, especially competitive, like slow games, just getting a bunch of ability haste, that's free gold, that's free stats. I think that'll be really important. And then there is a laundry list of champion quality improvements. Some of these matter more than others. I'll point out some of the ones that are a little bit more relevant. I didn't even know this was a Kled thing, but apparently Kled has variable duration on his Q, and now it's just going to be the 1.75 flat, which is a big deal. The other one that I thought was interesting was the Jace hammer now uses regular knockback instead of a fixed distance upon the spell being cast, which I don't know exactly what that means. I think that just will stop some weird interactions where you don't, or where maybe he gets sent back way farther than they're supposed to. But I know Jace E can be extremely buggy and strange and doesn't really go to what you'd expect. So I think it'll normalize that spell a lot more, and I'll be curious to see what that actually means. The other one that was quite large that I saw, there's a couple of them where Gragas W now applies to turrets, so his turret taking ability is going to be a lot stronger. The same thing with Jax, W and R now apply 50% damage to structures, so he also has better split push. Cho'Gath got a really interesting change, which is now as he gets bigger from his ulti like actual spell range is going to kind of reflect that, and he will have a larger ulti range. And I think that's really nice because Cho'Gath, one of the things that was really annoying is not being able to get a range to eat people, even though you're just this colossal monster. You should be able to eat these people. They're right on top of you, but either your R gets cast because they're just one frame away or something. So I think that's really nice. And Cho'Gath is a super viable right now. I think that's might help him in the future. And then one of the other changes I saw, Trundle Q has 25 bonus range, which I already thought it did. I'm not sure. I thought it already had an increased range, so I don't know if this is more range. I don't know if this is just a fix that it wasn't actually in the game. But Trundle also being already such an oppressive early game champ, like level 1 especially, you might actually see him doing more, getting more kills and really harassing more, because getting chomped once into getting ghosted and ran down can be really problematic. So I will try to feel this out and see how it feels. But as of right now, it looks like, wow, that could be a big deal for some of the matchups to get the little bit of range. The other ones, the other big one, that wards that will be placed besides a brush are now slightly nudged into them. I don't know how forgiving it's going to be, but I have a tendency to sometimes, as I assume everyone does, to miss my wards, slightly miss them out of the bush. So hopefully this does what I think it does, which it'll just put them in the bush, which will be awesome, because nothing feels worse than missing a ward in a bush. I think that's a really feels good change to have, where you don't really feel like, oh man, I just wasted my ward because I didn't press 1 frame over or 2 frames over. So I think that'll be really nice. And the rest of them, I think, are something to remain to be seen. A lot of them are stuff that you already thought was happening and it just didn't even happen. And that's pretty much all the patch notes. I mean, a lot of it is a bunch of other stuff like ARAM, which we won't go over, but yeah, kind of long, really big patch. I mean, this is probably the biggest back-to-back patches we've ever had. So I feel like the game is in a good spot, and I'm really excited to see what the what solo queue is going to look like. I think that with the shards will be really interesting. I think that's the biggest thing for me. I really like the shards change, and yeah, awesome patch. I think Riot's doing a great job freaking them. I think with as much stuff as they added to the game, in like the amount of time they've done it, it's been really, really good, and everything has felt pretty balanced outside of the support changes, which, as you saw, they changed it only a couple weeks after. I think this has been a really tremendous start to the season. All this considering we didn't really have a preseason, so really impressed. So thank you for watching. I mean, hey, if you stuck around to the end, I appreciate it. Like and subscribe. This is a lot of fun talking about it, and I hope you got something out of it. So thank you for watching.